Next we have Peter Bojanic, a man that saved my butt on many occasions. Without Peter, we would not have passed acceptance on the original data capacitor. Thank you. Peter Bojanic is Seagate Cloud Storage System and Solutions Senior Director of System Software, where he's responsible for Lustre and other scalable storage software technologies. Peter's leadership in high-performance computing spans a decade of ongoing responsibility for Lustre initiatives, dating back to 2005 at Cluster File Systems, CFS. With more than 25 years of IT industry experience, Peter, with his focus on HPC storage, is a key contributor in solving the biggest scale challenges in the world. Prior to his career in storage, Peter delivered leading-edge development tools and global enterprise information systems. Seagate, a gold sponsor of this conference, we're very, very grateful for their contribution. Ladies and gentlemen, Peter Bojanic. Man.
Thank you so much, Steve. And thank you for the kind compliments about data capacitor, but I have to say that it was really a team effort that led to that success, and a lot of the people are in this room today. So,
you got me what I needed when I needed it.
Cool. So I'm here today to give you a brief update. Is there a countdown timer, just or do I keep track of my time? Right on, you'll tell me. And how do I advance this thing? Which button do I press, or just the keyboard? There we go. Last year, I wasn't at LUG. I come to most LUGs, and I've been coming to LUGs for a lot of years, but unfortunately I wasn't here last year because we were going through integration stuff. Xyratex was acquired by Seagate, and I think it was Michael Connolly that came and gave the vendor update last year. And so, almost a full year later, we're very much part of Seagate. In fact, that Xyratex name that we still had attached to us is gone. And it still kind of emerges now and then, but really we're Seagate, and we're Seagate Cloud Systems and Solutions. And this organization that I'm part of brings together the HPC stuff that we were doing that you're probably familiar with, Cluster Store and Synexion through our OEM Cray, combines that with the hardware that we were making at Seagate for many years, the enterprise class OEM hardware that Cluster Store is based on, and then augments that with a whole series of scale-out reference architecture designs based on those same enterprise building blocks. We can configure and compose a lot of other types of solutions based on those bits and pieces. And then to round out that puzzle, we've got an entire cloud service. So the eVault is the company Seagate acquired, and there we've got backup in the cloud and long-term archive storage service and so forth. So Seagate Cloud Systems is really a full solution provider providing all of these pieces. What I'm going to talk to you today is really our interest in Lustre. And that's through the Cluster Store product line. Last year you would have seen a slide very much like this, so I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the product line. We've got everything from the Cluster Store 1500, which is a solution that allows you to scale up in rack units, taking these pieces that deliver a gigabyte per second increments, and you put those into racks and you scale them up. And then our high-end systems, the 6000 and now the 9000, that scale up in actual racks. You add a rack at a time. Each one of those scalable storage unit delivers 9 gigabytes per second throughput, and we can compose clusters as big as greater than 25 petabytes and more, and very large, very high throughput in excess of a terabyte. There's lots of information. We'd be happy to tell you about it outside. The difference with the Cluster Store solution, what we embarked on more than 4 years ago when we started Cluster Store, was to take the sophistication and the complexity of all these bits and pieces that you need in order to be able to compose a reliable, high-performance Lustre-based solution, and to encapsulate those and package them into a turnkey deployment. And that's what Cluster Store is. It takes all of our hardware, all of our enterprise hardware, combines that into a it combines that with our enterprise hardware, the controllers, the enclosures, the racks, the top-of-rack networking, all part of the solution. The software from the ground up, we integrate a Linux software stack based on Scientific Linux with open source Lustre, software RAID, and a lot of the pieces of open source software that you would be deploying in your own environments. Things for high availability and so forth. All of those open source bits and pieces, but instead of having to have an entire team of people that know how to integrate those things, or sending out a field service team that install from the ground up, all of that stuff is done in our manufacturing realm. So we actually install these clusters, provision them, deliver them, and they're turnkey. So you can get a cluster up and running, a fairly substantial cluster, up and running in hours or a day, as opposed to many days or weeks. And then single pane of glass management that brings it all together. So we're able to, through a single pane of glass, manage everything from the disks and what's going on in the RAIDs, all the way up through the file system and the services. And now in our later versions of software, we're actually integrating fairly sophisticated serviceability capabilities, including phone home and RAS and so forth. All of that in one package. We've been able to, with ClusterStor, take Lustre more broadly than successfully and fairly broadly into a number of markets. Here's all the verticals that we play in. Weather has been an area. Meteorology has been an area where we've had a number of successes with our partners. We're working with a lot of the people in Houston right now in the energy space. So a broad variety of verticals. ClusterStor is available through our partners. Cray is our OEM, and they actually brand ClusterStor as Synexion, add some value to it, have immense services and capabilities around supporting it and deploying it and innovating around it. And then we've got other types of relationships with other partners that vary in the amount of service that they provide and we provide. The idea being, though, that whether you're working through a partner or whether you're working through an OEM, that you can rely on a high degree of support. The entire solution stack would be supported through that vendor relationship. Here are some of the ClusterStor and Synexion customers that are out there. Some people in this room and some people that we've talked about as well. We've been doing ClusterStor for a lot of years, for about 4 years now, and the approach that we've taken in turnkey solutions and deterministic performance and predictable operating expense costs and so forth have led us to do some things that are a little bit different than conventional or historical Lustre deployments. I've been involved in a lot of those for a decade now. So we don't have a lot of user serviceable parts inside. We don't typically invite customers to run a lot of things or to run their own version of Lustre. That isn't necessarily a technical limitation. It's more of a support policy. And if you talk to a number of people who are running ClusterStor and Synexion today, you'll find that there is an amount of variation, because really technically under the hood it's a lot of the same parts that you would expect and a lot of the same layers of software. But we approach it from a way that is quite deterministic. Top 5 misconceptions about ClusterStor, and I'm going to try to adjust some of the perceptions or some of the myths about them today. The ClusterStor uses an ancient version of Lustre, and indeed our solutions have been based on Lustre 2.1 kind of up until recently. We're now shipping Lustre 2.5. ClusterStor does not use an open source compatible version of Lustre. It's the same OpenSFS Lustre that a lot of you guys are using today. So it's the same Lustre. ClusterStor is a closed solution. Yes, generally by support policy, we don't invite the same kind of innovation inside of the box as we ship it, but we're capable of that kind of collaboration with our customers and partners. Nothing technically that limits it. Seagate can't support Lustre, and Seagate does not contribute to Lustre. We'll try to dispel a couple of those myths as well. So although the product line didn't change, we were talking to you about the CS ClusterStor 9000 last year. The big change this year is that we've added 2.5 support. So in fact, it's a 2.5.1 base plus, which we'll talk about in a little bit. DNE is probably one of the most important features that comes in Lustre 2.5. we don't really need to go into the depths of what DNE is, but suffice to say that with the same kind of turnkey and deterministic approach that we've taken with ClusterStor, we've done the same thing with DNE support. So you just add these ADUs, these additional directory units. They're installed in the factory, and each ADU increases your addressable file system space and the performance of your metadata capabilities. So we can go up to, with support for 8 ADUs, so that's 16 MDTs. We can go up to 246. Actually, these numbers I think are a little bit low. I was corrected on these, but about 246,000 file creates per second, and in excess of 15 billion files in a file system. And that's thanks to the DNE feature. Just deployed through our hardware. And then, since it's part of the ClusterStor solution, the monitoring, the serviceability, all those types of things come with those ADU units. Lustre 2.5 also introduced Lustre HSM support. Seagate does not provide an end-to-end Lustre HSM solution, but all of the plumbing for an end-to-end Lustre HSM solution is available through ClusterStor and Synexion. So our partners, Cray, where they talked about TAS earlier on, you can achieve, Cray can deliver an end-to-end HSM solution based on Synexion, plus some other bits that they add to that, the Robinhood Policy Manager, the data mover, the back-end storage bits. SGI is also advancing on a similar type of solution. And customers can roll their own as well. You can take Synexion or ClusterStor. All the plumbing is there if you want to be responsible for the data mover and the policy engine bits. It just consumes change logs and uses Lustre interfaces. This merits a little bit of explanation. What we do with Lustre, or with our Neo software stack that goes into ClusterStor, is that we base it on the open source releases, but then we optimize for performance at scale with a variety of workloads for our customers. So we are more conservative than OpenSFS in the industry. We don't keep pace with all of the releases. We do, however, have a very capable team of engineers that watch master and are continually porting important fixes. So when we say that our Neo 1.x stuff was based on Lustre 2.1, that was the baseline, but we've actually incorporated over time in excess of 300 patches, some of them generated by us and contributed, a lot of them generated by Intel and other community members here. We incorporate those into our release. And then we take the same approach with Lustre 2.5. Before we put our first system, our Lustre 2.5 system out, we had ported in excess of 850 patches. So again, focused on stability and reliability and diversity at scale. We're contributors to OpenSFS. We sit on the OpenSFS board. We were founding members of EOFS. Our financial contribution, because this is an important thing, this is how do we keep there's been a lot of talk about how do you keep the Lustre community vibrant. A lot of that is through contribution. Some of it comes just down to cash, and we've put into OpenSFS through promoter level contributions in excess of $2 million over the last 4 years. We've donated Lustre.org. That took a lot. It's amazing how long these things that you think should be simple will take. But Lustre.org was through an acquisition that we did through Intel, contributed to the community. We are going to talk on Thursday about the Hadoop connector based on some work that we did over the last couple of years and evolved more recently within Seagate. We've got this Hadoop connector that works with Hadoop 1 and version 2. There's a talk on that tomorrow, so I encourage you to, actually on Thursday I think the talk is. And we open sourced Experior, which is our automated test system. We have support for not only Lustre and for our storage stack, but we support everything from the drives, the enclosures, the controllers, everything in the entire storage stack through Seagate and through our partners, end-to-end, one throat to choke. And Seagate powers, now to be truthful, we know that the Trinity system is going to be deployed this summer. But 4 out of the 5 1 terabyte plus systems are actually based on Cluster Store. Blue Waters was our first, based on Lustre 2.1, and that's been running for a number of years now. We're in the process of deploying KAUST and DKRZ, and we're looking forward to the challenges of Trinity this summer. A lot of those with Cray, and DKRZ is with another partner recently. And that's everything that I had for today. Do we have a minute for questions? Yeah, any questions?